Hey there everybody, my name is Graham Johnson. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the characters from the character starter set from The Army Painter. Now, just to put some context out there, this kit was sent to me to make some content over on TikTok, but I thought I'd kill two birds with one stone and go ahead and use it for some videos over here. I don't know if we'll be painting up all 5 of the figures over here on YouTube, but I definitely will be painting all 5 of them soon and posting them over on TikTok, so keep an eye out for that. Enough of my jabbering, let's get on with the video. Now for full disclosure, this kit was sent to me by The Army Painter to make videos over on TikTok. They did not ask me to do any content here on YouTube, but I thought this product was interesting enough that it deserved a video over here. If we make more videos involving the miniatures from this in the future, I will not be limiting myself to this box like I did for today's video. Now in today's video, I wanted to see what an example of just using the products in this box could accomplish. And so by just using the products provided, the paint that comes in this kit, this singular brush that comes in this kit, and one of the 5 miniatures, I wanted to see what we could accomplish as a miniature painter with some skill. Now I am doing some more advanced techniques that we haven't really covered, such as wet blending, but there are plenty of videos out there on YouTube on how to do that, including one of my own. I will talk through what I'm doing though to give you guys a good idea of how you would create the cloak that I'm going to be painting for this figure. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to crack in, and we're just going to real quick talk about what exactly comes in this set so that you guys understand what I'm limiting myself to. Flipping the box over, we can see that we get one starter brush. Now this brush is a mixture between what I would describe as a layer brush and a detail brush, and is actually really nice, and I will continue to use it as a detail brush until I eventually kill it. As well as 20 individual colors, one of which is a brush on primer. You also get 2 washes, one that's a flesh tone and one that's an equivalent to Nuln Oil, which is the black wash. You get 2 different flesh tones, and you get 2 of their metallics, one in silver and one in gold. There's an agitator in there. Oh my god, they put agitators in the little bottles? Now I knew I wanted to do some kind of 3-color fade, and I ended up actually adding purple up near the head of the cloak, making this a 4-color fade. My idea is I wanted to go for some kind of mystical cloak, something that could be like a Cloak of Shadows or something like that, as this being a rogue type character. Now I could end up using this also for a druid or any other type of character that would be wearing leather armor, so I wanted to make sure that the cloak was ambiguous enough that I could use it for a plethora of different miniatures or use it as it was intended. My initial intention was to use the purple more as a wash, but I quickly realized that with these colors they don't really turn into washes very good without adding some kind of medium to them. And with me trying to limit myself to what was just included in the starter set, I felt it wasn't necessarily true to the challenge I had set myself out to do if I had just started adding different mediums from different companies. I wanted to actually really test this starter kit and make sure that it was good for anybody who has some experience or no experience. And I really wanted to see the quality and the type of miniature that you can create using just what's included in the box. So at the end of the day, I decided to not add anything to this kit. Now you will notice at the very end that there are some tufts of grass that are included on the miniature, and those are actually Army Painter tufts as well, so if you want to pick some of those up when you pick up your kit, I highly encourage you to, as the quality of them is pretty nice. Prior to this point, I had really only ever used Army Painter metallics, and so I wasn't really quite prepared for the way that this paint was going to, well, spread on the miniature. And as you can see with my first layer, you can really see the brush strokes, and I honestly wasn't super happy with how thin this was. Now I think it would look excellent had I run this through an airbrush, and I really could have gotten some dynamic lighting going on with my miniature had I gone ahead and done a zenithal highlight and then put a really thin coat of this through the airbrush. That having been said, I wanted to challenge myself, knowing that not everyone has an airbrush, and we ended up actually putting about 3 coats worth of paint onto this miniature. Now, this was a great starting point to then do wet blending. Now, if you're not familiar with wet blending, in my opinion, it's always easier to blend your darker colors into your brighter colors. And what I like to do is I like to get both areas of the miniature painted to the color that I want it. As you can see here, I've already gotten plenty of saturation between my dark blue, and then I got plenty of saturation in my teal before I began blending the two. You'll see that I'm focusing more in my darker blue and blending that down into the teal, and that's going to give me a much smoother transition. Now, if you are a little less confident in this and you're worried about maybe overpowering something and making the blend impure and not actually going all the way to the color that you want, you could do what I've done similarly with the green. And that is, I've allowed it to dry, and I'm going to allow the teal to dry, and then I'm going to put a second layer of the teal and the green on top of each other and then blend those back and forth until I can no longer see the point where the teal and green met and there is a smooth transition between the two. One of the biggest secrets to wet blending is keeping your paint moving as well as keeping it moist. Once it begins to dry on your miniature, you really want to stop. It doesn't matter if you're happy with the result, go ahead and stop, allow it to dry, then apply a fresh coat on top of both areas and begin wet blending again. This is really important to do it this way because if you continue to move paint around as it dries, you'll end up with texture that you didn't want, in addition to not getting the blend you were hoping to get. So it's always important that once your paint begins to dry, you go ahead and let it dry before attempting to wet blend again with a fresh layer on top. Now, I knew with some of the washes that I was going to be laying into the recesses and the shadows that I was going to be building up that the green wasn't quite vibrant enough, so I went ahead and added a little bit of yellow onto my palette and I mixed that in and I basically applied that as a glaze across the whole bottom half of just the green section. One of the reasons why we've not really covered wet blending a lot on the channel so far is because when it comes to adding highlights and shadows into wet blending, it can be a bit tricky, especially for an untrained eye or someone like myself who's colorblind. We kind of have to lead ourselves in the right direction and trust that color theory has our back. For me, I typically end up blending slightly darker colors than what I probably should and then apply them as washes and glazes, and I apply very small amounts, allow it to dry, and then apply more. It really is the case of less is more when it comes to miniature painting, especially in this case, as we can always add more layers of washes and glazes. We can't remove them, and if we take things too far, we have to either modify the area around them to make it look appropriate, or we have to strip the miniature and start over. If you were sitting here watching me paint this miniature in live time without any cuts, you would notice that as I build up my shadows, I'm doing everything from blending blues and purples into my greens, to blending greens into my teals and purples, and everything in between. Now, the reason I'm using the existing colors that I've already used on the miniature as opposed to using blacks and whites is because it allows me to add more contrast to the miniature. A lot of times when we think of contrast, we think of black and white, the most extreme contrast. But the reality is that black and white are both such powerful colors that when we add them to our miniature, we can oftentimes blow things out of proportion. By adding black into our shadows, we oftentimes don't end up with realistic results. And the same to be said by adding whites to our highlights, we oftentimes end up with pastels. So it's important that we use similar colors when we create our darkness and our light. Now, for my case, like I said with my darker colors, I'm mixing a lot of my existing colors to end up with shadows. That's because when I did my wet blend, I went ahead and did that from the perspective of this is the brightest the colors are going to be, and I'm going to blend down into my shadows. For me, this is what works really well with wet blending, at least because of my color blindness. You may find that other methods are more suitable for you. There are so many different techniques, and all of them are correct. It's entirely up to our thought process and our learning process and what works well for us. Just because something works really well for me doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work well for you. Now, since I was wanting to paint this to feel a bit more like a a cloak of shadows, if you will. In my mind, a cloak of shadows is meant to help you blend in with different environments, whether it be out in the forest or whether it be in some back alley somewhere. This is meant to help you blend in with the surroundings, and maybe some magical silk of some kind is basically similar to an octopus, can move the inks around within the fabric to help you blend in with different environments. And as such, there would need to be a lot of different pigments in the cloak. So I wanted to represent this by adding a lot of freehand work. Now, I didn't want to go super overboard, so I decided to go with this lattice pattern of roughly equally distant lines in a hash pattern, and then at the very top of the cloak I kind of did like a starry sky scene. Now, I feel like any good rogue that would have an ornate item like this, or a magical ornate item like this, would also want it to blend in when it's not actives, hence why we're going out of our way to do some freehand detail work. Or at least that's the excuse I'm giving to have a little bit of fun. Now we're getting ready to paint the face next, and I wish I had grabbed a close-up of it before I started putting paint on. We're gonna show here just in a second a clip of what some of the faces look like in the rest of the miniatures. Two of them, the faces are covered and have some very generic eyes, like they basically look the same outside of their face coverings. And for the other two, there's a very distinct looking face for what is the tiefling, and for the human, it's a very generic face. And when you paint it, it's probably going to look just as bad as the one for the rogue. There's not a huge level of detail in the sculpt, and I think they've done that to make it easy to remove from the mold. And that's something that I'm not super happy with, because as someone who can paint faces, I don't want to spend 3 hours painting a face to paint details that weren't sculpted. In this video, I'm basically just slapping skin tone on, putting a wash, and then slapping some more skin tone highlight on to build up the colors. And it never looks good. It looks really bad. I am not gonna lie, I'm not happy with the way the face turned out on the final product. However, that having been said, if I had really spent some time and gone in with some different brands of paint and sculpted up the details and gone all the way through the color range, I could have ended up with something really nice, and we will do that on the human female in the example that I showed. But for this one, I wanted to just use the products that came in the box, and I didn't want to spend an hour to 3 hours working on a face, so the face turned out the way it did. Now, is it horrendous? Is it horrific? No, but it doesn't look any better than the very first miniature that I ever painted, so take that with a grain of salt. Sorry. Now, all of that aside, I went ahead and hit it with the darkest flesh tone that it had, and I added a tiny bit of red to bring it closer to Bugman's Glow, as that is what I'm familiar with, and then built my highlights up from there. Now, in hindsight, I probably didn't need to do this for as bright as I ultimately ended up making the skin tone, but I did. So I basically used this pinkish red and covered the whole skin, and then highlighted it up using the brighter skin tone I was given mixed with the darker skin tone in about a 50-50 mix. Then I hit it with a flesh shade, and then I hit it with the highlights. And then I hit it with the highlights again and again. I was never really quite happy with the way the face turned out, and again, it's because I don't think there's a lot of sculptor going on in the face. I think it's a bland face, and that's probably why I didn't like the way it looked. Less definitely would have been more, and I probably shouldn't have put as many layers of paint on the model as what I ultimately did. But lesson learned for next time. Now I ended up using the same brown that I am using for all of the leather here, the darkest brown that I was given. I ended up using this in a watered down form to kind of glaze over the hair and darken things up quite a bit, as I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to make them blonde or brunette. In any case here, we're going ahead and I'm just covering up pretty much everything that's going to be in and on or around the leather. I wanted this to be a nice, deep, rich leather, and then I built the highlights up from there. Now the two browns it comes with, which is Bear Brown and Dryad Brown, are really nice browns for leather. However, in the case of the Rogue, I knew that the items that they would have on them had probably been with them for a long time. Most rogues tend to be very much object-centric. What is theirs, and they have a hard time getting rid of it. Or at least the rogues at a lot of my D&D tables are. So I knew that a lot of the items they were going to have on them were probably going to be showing quite a bit of age, and I knew that Dryad Brown wasn't going to be quite bright enough. So I'm actually using the brightest brown it comes with as a mid-tone, and I'm mixing a small amount of yellow in to get an even brighter brown. This resulted in me being able to achieve a Xandri Dust type color to do all of my most extreme highlights as well as the weathering of the leather, and I really like the way it turned out. I also used a mixture of brown and red washes to go ahead and slightly dye different parts of the armor in different colors, to almost give the illusion that perhaps this has been pieced together from different kits that they have found throughout the years. Perhaps some pieces of leather are newer and older, and some are more well kept than others. So all in all, what are my final thoughts and what do I say about this product? Well, if you're new to miniature painting and you don't have a lot of paints yet, I do actually recommend this kit. I believe the retail is at $59.99 USD, that's American dollars. This kit's really nice. For the fact that you get agitators in as large bottles, in fact, I'm pretty sure that these are larger bottles than most other Learn to Paint sets. The material that comes in there, the basic teaching you how to paint, is very basic. A basic YouTube video, like the one you just watched, will probably teach you just as much, if not more, than what you're going to get in the paperwork that comes in this box, which is fine. The brush, fantastic. I plan to keep using it. I plan to keep using the paints. The miniatures, give it another year or two and we'll see where the Army Painter's at with their miniature line. I really like the miniatures that came in this set, and I think they're great for someone who's just getting started. Are they going to be the flagship of my miniature collection? No, I have everything from 3D printed to special resin miniatures that are just absolutely gorgeous. And although these will hold a place on the shelf and be great for anybody who needs to borrow a miniature for a D&D game, at the end of the day, I've got plenty of miniatures, and these probably won't stand out on a shelf outside of maybe the paint schemes that I'll do on them will make them stand out. But other than that, yeah, I think the set's great. I think you should buy it. I do. If you're an experienced miniature painter, this may not be the set for you, but if you are still trying to build up your paint collection and you are new to miniature painting, I think there is plenty of bang for your buck there, and I think it's worth getting. Even if you're a wargamer and you're not super into D&D, you can probably find someone at your local hobby shop that would be willing to trade you some stuff for the miniatures that come in the box, and this would be a really awesome way for you, even as a wargamer, to build up your paint collection and add another brush to the pile. Well, that's going to wrap things up for today. I hope you guys really enjoyed today's video. However, you'll notice that every time the miniature comes around, that my camera loses focus every time the face appears. It would appear that the camera also agrees with me that the face was painted pretty horrendously because the autofocus doesn't recognize it as a face, and apparently doesn't want to look at it either. Regardless, I think you'll think the rest of the miniature turned out pretty awesome. In fact, I really enjoyed the results I got, and I can't wait to work on more miniatures from this set. If you guys would like to see all 5 of the miniatures done here on the YouTube channel, just let me know in the comments below. As of right now, I'll probably only be doing 1 or 2 more, but if you would like to see them all, I'm more than happy to do them all. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys coming and spending your time with me. It does mean the world to me. We're actually right on the verge of me being able to say that this is my full-time job, and we wouldn't be here without your support. As always, I do have a Patreon if you guys are interested in that. My minimum subscription, I believe, is currently at $1, although that may be changing to $2 soon due to the way that Patreon is changing the way that they do things. However, simply by subscribing to Patreon at that minimum subscription, you automatically get access to everything there. In addition, you also get an additional entry for any giveaways that we do here on the channel. That's a free second entry. Now, regardless, at the end of the day, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I hope your display case is always filled and your pile of shame never runs empty. I'll see you guys in the next one.